I have, via the magic of Skype, Tory Baucum. He is the rector of Truro Church, which is in Virginia. And I wanted to talk to you today, and I want to thank you for some time you're going to spend with me. You have been appointed the sixth preacher of Canterbury. And for those who are not in the know with the Mother Church and what happens over there, that's actually a prestigious appointment. What is the sixth preacher?
Well, according to my daughters, it's a rating system. It means I'm not quite a 10, but I'm better than a 5. So I guess I'm a little bit above average as a preacher. But actually, it was started in 1541 by Archbishop Cranmer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Canterbury was a Benedictine abbey, and after the Reformation, or during the Reformation, Cranmer wanted the church recatechized according to the doctrines of the Reformation, especially justification by faith. Mm-hmm. And so he created these 6 preachers as part of his attempt to recatechize the church.
And over time, there's been some famous people that have been the sixth preacher, including yourself, of course. Currently, we have Mike Green is one of them. Who are the other 4 that I can't think of right now?
Well, I'm not sure I know all of them. Mm-hmm. Bishop Josiah Farron from Nigeria, I believe, is one of them. Mm-hmm. There's a New Testament scholar, a laywoman, in England by the name of Paula Gooder. Mm-hmm. And I believe Michael Battle is also one of the 6 preachers. Mm-hmm. I don't know all of them.
Okay, well, you're here in America. How were you chosen by the Archbishop to be the 6th preacher?
Well, you know, it's a long story, but I think the succinct version is that Archbishop Duncan and Archbishop Welby worked on this together. Mm-hmm. And in fact, about 4 days before I heard from Lambeth, I heard from Archbishop Duncan that I would be hearing from Lambeth about this appointment. And sure enough, I did. December 23rd, I got a text message to call a number in England. I didn't know who it was. I called, and it was Archbishop Welby on the other end of the line telling me that he was making me a 6th preacher.
Oh. No, you did not ask him what a 6th preacher was. You knew him beforehand, right?
No, actually, I didn't know what it was, and I did ask him.
Well, that's kind of cool. Now, you are a rector in the ACNA, the Anglican Church of North America, and obviously there's a relationship trying to be developed between Canterbury, the Church of England, and the ACNA. But when I'm looking at all the priests here in the ACNA, were they able to find a priest that has not been deposed?
Yeah, that's true. I haven't been deposed. Partly it's because I transferred to England in 2005. Mm-hmm. Of course, some of the depositions had already started by then, but not the great wave of them. And that was partly due to the fact that I was a seminary professor. I didn't have a cure, mm-hmm. and a lot of my work on the side was being done for Holy Trinity Brompton. I was a speaker for them at their conferences, mm-hmm. really all over the country, and so Holy Trinity Brompton made me a missioner, which allowed Bishop Chartres to receive me into the Diocese of London. So I never have been deposed, and that certainly helped.
That's good. Now, you also made the news because you are a peacemaker. You've worked for Alpha, you're a rector at Trinity, but you've done some work recently, which I guess we'll call the work of a peacemaker, and that's made you kind of newsworthy on the blogs, for better or for worse.
Yeah, that's what I hear anyway.
Tell me about your peacemaker work.
Well, you know, Kevin, I think most Christians realize that, you know, peacemaking is very important to Christ. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." It's part of his own ethos. Mm-hmm. And I see it as a means towards reconciliation. Reconciliation in the full biblical sense doesn't always occur in this lifetime. But as much as within us, as Paul says, we should be at peace with all men. And so I think it's a gospel imperative when Jesus sent his disciples ahead of him through Samaria. He told them to look for a man of peace. If he found him, to stay with him and do their ministry from the house of a man of peace. When he gets to Jerusalem in chapter 19, 9 chapters later, he weeps over Jerusalem because he says they do not know the things that will make for peace, and therefore desolation has come upon their house.
Peace.
So my point is that all through the Gospel of Luke, you have that is a subtext for Jesus's ministry in and through Samaria, which, as you know, were the heretics of his day. They were the doctrinal deviants. And so what we have to be clear about is that peacemaking is not adiaphora. It's not just something we can kind of agree to disagree about whether or not Christians ought to be doing it. And indeed, to suggest it's adiaphora is in fact a form of false teaching. And so for me, really just comes out of being a disciple, comes out of being a follower of Jesus Christ. You're not always successful, and I haven't always been successful, but I don't really see it as a luxury item, something I can just dispense with.
Well, it comes with some limitations. Can you?
Yeah.
And struggles. Peacemaking and reconciliation, as you already mentioned, are not the same things. But I think you and Archbishop Welby both are trying to make a path forward for reconciliation and peacemaking in the church. Have you had success in any of your peacemaking endeavors?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a level of peace in our relationship with the Episcopal Diocese that was not there a few years ago. I wouldn't say there's full biblical reconciliation, but I would say, the desire to hurt each other is gone, and that is not bad. So, yeah, I think there's been progress, and I think it's long-term work. I mean, what I often say to our folks is this is an intergenerational battle that we're in. I don't think we're going to see reconciliation with the Episcopal Church in my lifetime, and possibly not the lifetime of my daughters, and they're young. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be working towards it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to create the context, and that's what peacemaking does. It creates the context where reconciliation has a chance to happen.
As I mentioned before, your work has raised the eyebrows of some bloggers on the blogosphere and some consternation. Why do you think your work as a peacemaker is causing constriction across the internet?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I don't spend much time on the blogs. So, I mean, you'd have to ask those people.
Sure.
I don't know for sure. I think part of it is that we're still in an ecclesiastical battle. So it's difficult to do peacemaking while people are still fighting, while lawsuits are still happening. I think some people think it is appeasement. It's not appeasement at all. It's not making nice. It's making room. It's making room for holiness and kindness and a place for the Holy Spirit to work in people's hearts. But I think when you're in the middle of a battle, it doesn't always look that way or feel that way. And also, I think, people have very different reads on this. Some people don't see peacemaking as a gospel imperative. And that's just one, fundamental difference that I would have with some folks.
Well, we talked about peacemaking, we talked about reconciliation. What's your definition of Christian reconciliation?
Well, I think there's different levels of reconciliation. For example, Jacob and Esau are reconciled in Genesis 33, but Esau does not become a son of the covenant. But Esau no longer has the desire to kill his brother. And I would say that's progress. But in the sense that Esau is a son of the covenant that the way Jacob is, no, that has not happened. So there's degrees of it. And I don't think there's full reconciliation in the full biblical sense that Paul articulates it until the eschaton. So there's varying degrees of it. But I think what you want in the church when there's a schism that has occurred, which is what happened in 2003. At least that's where I date the beginning of the schism in the Anglican Communion, and this is what I articulated at Coventry. Until those issues are dealt with, there's not going to be full reconciliation, I think, in the Anglican Communion. So you have to go at the heart of the offense. What caused the breakup in the relationship?
Well, then what would, and maybe generations down the line, what would full reconciliation look like between the ACNA and TEC and the Anglican Communion?
Well, I think TEC is going to have to reconcile itself to the teaching of the Anglican Communion on this matter. And that teaching has not been changed. It's, ignored, and it's challenged, but it hasn't been changed. The ancient boundaries are the right boundaries. Sex is for marriage, and marriage is between a man and a woman. So I think that, until that gets fully resolved, that we're at least clear as to what the Christian standards are for our conduct in this matter. Until that gets resolved, there's not going to be full biblical reconciliation in that sense, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, I've heard discussions more on the other side of the pond from England that we're just going to have to work within this context where the Episcopal Church has a different opinion of sexuality than we do, but we can still be one church. Do you see that as, a working model?
Well,
I know, big theological question, Kevin, but
it all depends on your definition of terms. One church. I don't see TEC and ACNA becoming one ecclesiastical body. At least not until these issues have been resolved. Could there be a parallel province in North America? Yeah, I do. I mean, that will send up howls, in the Episcopal Church. But frankly, I think that's the only way forward. I think, we're going to have something similar to what they have in Europe, where there's overlapping jurisdictions in the same geographical area. Because, essentially what we have right now are 2 or 3 or 4 different communions. Half of the Anglican Communion does not recognize TEC. I mean, I'm being general in my terms. I don't know how.
I do that all the time.
Exact percentages. And then there's another half that recognize ACNA, and a half that recognize TEC, and that's just the facts on the ground. So there's got to be some way of, unless we just want to split and go 3 or 4 separate ways, which I know some people want to do, and they argue for that. I myself am against that. So I think there's going to have to be some sort of dual provinces within North America. And I don't think that's going to happen overnight. That's why I'm very realistic. I say, I think this is going to take a decade or so for that to happen. But that's just one priest's opinion.
No, it's the 6th preacher opinion.
It's not authoritative. It's not authoritative. And so I think that's another thing that motivates me in the peacemaking. Because one of the things that makes it difficult for some people in the Episcopal Church that actually do like us, and there are some who do like us, but they get very nervous when they believe that we are out to replace them or we are out to destroy them. And Kevin, that's never been my view. That's never been my own position. I don't feel like we can go there. That's a lot of you have to be sustained by a lot of anger and rage to have that attitude that you're out to destroy somebody else. And I don't think our best leaders actually take that view. I think they say, well, no, we just want to build a province. We want to be a province that is safe for conservative Orthodox Anglicans in North America. We believe the Episcopal Church is not a safe place. And in good conscience, we can't stay there. So we're creating this, but we're not trying to replace TEC. And that's my own view. I'm not trying to, Trudeau's not trying to replace the Episcopal Diocese of Virginia. That's never been our position. In fact, when we left in 2006, that was 6 months before I got here, the vestry wrote that their goal was to have the highest level of communion possible with the Episcopal Diocese of Virginia. As we were leaving, that's what we were saying. And so this has been a very consistent journey for Truro. It's not something new. This work of peacemaking was one of the things that attracted the Truro vestry to me, why they called me. And it's something I've been doing pretty much since I've been here. It only became public knowledge a couple of years ago. But it wasn't a surprise to the vestry or the parish. This has been their heart all along. So that's some of the context. I think if we could communicate that to tech, it would be helpful, because as long as they believe we're out to replace them or destroy them, it makes it very difficult for Lambeth or anyone in England to kind of say, we want to work with both of you. And there are a lot of people in England, I think, who would like to work with both of us.
Well, some of the concerns I would have then is, if we're working with both of them, are we not acknowledging their gospel is the same gospel as our gospel? That their gospel of human sexuality and same-sex marriage and some of, I hate to use the word heresies,
Yes.
are legit. And then, if there's parallel Anglicanism here in America, that's a struggle that I kind of have internally in this recognition process.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, I didn't know we were going to go down this road and at this level of detail. I mean, I think a lot of other things would need to happen. And one of the reasons I was for the Anglican Covenant was that it had a mechanism for dealing with this, kind of a second tier Anglicanism, which was a way to discipline people who, or provinces who are not willing to kind of play by the rules. So, by saying that there's two provinces isn't my way of saying, there's kind of a moral equivalence, but it is saying that tech is a reality. ACNA is a reality. I don't think there's mechanisms within the communion to get rid of people, to get rid of provinces. There may be, but I just don't see it. I don't understand. I haven't had anyone articulate how that can happen. So it is fiction to think that we're going to split in half, Kevin.
No,
if there's a split, it'll split about 4 or 5 ways. So if you don't want that to happen, there's got to be a way to, I think, hold people together and also discipline them. And I've said this to my friend Shannon Johnston. I do think, and I said this at Coventry, I do think the Episcopal Church needs to be disciplined. But, I see discipline as restorative, not punitive. There has to be a mindset, a heart that seeks to restore people. And I think that is just going to take a long, long time. Because I don't think there's the mechanisms in place. And basically we have to create the mechanisms and then try to apply them. And but it's either that or we're gonna split up in 3 or 4 directions.
Yeah, and to be up front, I didn't think the conversation we're going to have would go this way either. I think this is a Holy Spirit-led thing. I was going to talk to you next about what's the schedule of a 6th preacher. So let's move on to that question. What is the schedule of a 6th preacher? When do you have to fly out often to preach at Canterbury, or do you travel around the world? What type of role does that work into?
Well, it means preaching twice a year at Canterbury normally.
Okay.
There's not a hard fast rule, but it's preaching and teaching 2 times a year. There's a study center at Canterbury where clergy, priests, lay people, seminarians come from all over the world to study. Sometimes the 6 preachers are called upon to lecture to those bodies. So that's one thing I may be doing, is lecturing in my areas of expertise to seminarians from around the world, clergy, lay leaders, and then preaching. I usually go to England at least twice a year because I serve on the board of Alpha. I also serve on the board of Fresh Expressions, the USA branches. So I have lots of opportunities to go to England, and I'll probably try to tie in the preaching opportunities when I'm doing that other work.
That's great. I do
Yeah.
want to thank you for your time, and I'm certainly encouraged that the Holy Spirit led us in a wonderful conversation. Now, when's your next trip to Canterbury? Have you put that on paper? I'd certainly like to get a cameraman out there for your first teaching at Canterbury.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Um, I'll probably be going back to England in May, but I don't know that I'll be going to Canterbury. I'll be working with the dean and the chapter on that soon.
Hmm.
But it'll probably be late 2014 or early 2015 when I ascend the pulpit.
All right. Well, please send us an email so we can be there. Thank you
Abs-
again, Tori, for your time, and God bless your ministry.
Okay, Kevin, likewise. God bless.